Hi everyone, it's Rachel back with the Shades of Orange, and today I'm here to do a good old-fashioned book haul. I like to think of myself as a booktube channel that doesn't do a lot of hauls, but I feel like I'm doing one really soon again, and so I guess I just have a lot of mail that's coming in. So this is a combination of books that I received from publishers for review, as well as a few belated birthday gifts. I'm going to have some generic timestamps down below if you want to skip around a little bit, but this is a combination of horror thrillers, science fiction, and fantasy, and I got some really good books to talk about. So let's get started. First, let's talk about a few belated birthday gifts from very generous online friends. The first one being, I want to call him my friend, but he's a good subscriber, Chris, who always leaves the most thoughtful, insightful comments. He's always giving me book recommendations, and it always brings a smile to my face when I see his comments in the chat. So the first book that he sent me for my birthday was The Gutter Prayer. This is the start of an epic trilogy of fantasy that is hard to describe, honestly. It's a book that you really have to read. It's possibly a favorite of the year in terms of backlist fantasy, and in this story we follow three different individuals that are trying to pull off a heist. Something goes horribly wrong. What I love about this book is the world building and the characters. I find that they're so rich and they're specifically so unique and different than the kinds of things I normally see in epic fantasy. While it is epic, it also has more of an urban feel because a lot of this book takes place in one location and it feels a bit more intimate. Needless to say, I really love this one and I'm very excited to have a copy of it because it's definitely one that I want to reread and check out once again before the end of the year and I finalize all of my best of the year lists. And the other book that he sent me is The Dawn Hounds, which, if you don't know, is another fantasy book. And this is one involving a queer police officer or police woman who gets in trouble for going to a bar and getting involved in some sort of tryst. And then she ends up dying, coming back to life, and ends up on a ship with pirates. It's a really crazy plot, but it's so much fun and it really does work. And I am just obsessed with pirates right now. And so I love this book, which has sea shanties. It's funny, it's quirky, it's different. It almost has like a biopunk element to it. It just has everything. And so if you can't tell, I really enjoyed it when I read it. And obviously Chris saw my gushing review of it. And so I was really happy when he picked it up off my Amazon wish list because I'm really excited again to have it, reread it. And just thank you again, Chris. This is such a generous birthday gift. And then from another bookish friend, I got a copy of The Lake of the Dead by Andre. I'm not even going to pronounce that last name. It is this beautiful horror novella, and this was sent to me by my bookish online friend, Elen, if I'm saying that right. And she happens to have an Instagram account, so I'm going to link it down below, but I definitely know that's not why she sent it. She sent it as a belated birthday gift. And this, I understand, is a really classic or traditional horror story that is written by a Norwegian author, which is where she is from. And so she wanted me to check it out. She absolutely loves it. I've never heard about it. I love the idea of reading more translated horror, but often it's so hard to get a hold of them. This book was not in my library. I don't know where else I would have found it. And so I was really excited to receive a copy of this. It's got a really cute cover. And again, it's fairly short as novella, but apparently it's quite a powerful story. And I'm very excited, of course, to come back and review it for you all. I've been holding off to read it until I got to do this haul video, but likely I won't hold off much longer, so hopefully I'll have a review coming very soon. And of course, hopefully I love it as much as she does. Now let's talk horror, specifically horror from one author. So I got contacted by J.Z. Foster, who I have reviewed books for in the past. I understand that he was moving, and so he was looking to send out some of the review copies that were keeping space in his house and something he probably didn't want to have to pack up for his move. And so he asked if I would like a set of review books. I said yes, absolutely. So he sent me a whole stack. The first one is The Wicked Ones, which is this really tragic horror story involving parents and a loss of a child. I believe I read this the first time before I had children and I didn't fully connect with the story. And then I read it again after I had a child, and oh my goodness, the story devastated me. So I'm really excited to read it again. Now that my son's a little bit older, I think I can handle it better, but I'm really excited to give this one another go. He also sent me some short stories. So we have this one, The Harrowing Horrors, Demon Weed, as well as Harrowing Horrors 2, Shades of the Abyss, which is similar to Shades of Orange. And these are definitely covers done in the style of scary stories, and so it definitely has some really great appeal. You know me, I'm not reading a lot of short stories these days, but again, the covers are kind of calling to me, so maybe I'll dabble into them. The series I'm most excited about from him were these ones that start with Hell on Mars, and for those of you that are always looking for space horror, this is a great one to check out. So I've only read the first book, and so that is Hell on Mars, but then the author also sent me most of the rest of the series. So I have book 2, which is Call of the Void, and these covers are gorgeous. My husband always comments when I get really gorgeous covers in, and he was really impressed by these. Crash, Burn, Die, and then we have World at War. And then Hold the Line, and again, these are just all so beautiful. And they're also fuzzy too. Does anyone else like fuzzy covers? And this one is Earth Siege, and the, I believe, final book, so this is the 9th book, is Hell on Earth. And yeah, just very excited to binge through all of them. They're all relatively short, so I do think they're going to be kind of easy to fly through. And my hope is to kind of work through the collection of books these send, hopefully over the winter holidays. And I also want to talk about a few other horror books I received from other places. The first one being Loot by Jennifer Thorne. This is a Tor Nightfire title, and the basic idea is that it's set on this island where 7 people have to die, I believe, every 7 years, and the story is compared to a couple of movies, but I've heard from other reviewers that the movie comparisons kind of spoil the twist of the book, so I'm not going to say them on camera, but I should have a review for this coming very soon. Also in that same review video, expect a review of Little Eve by Katrina Ward. This is her newest book that is coming out here in North America. I think it was released a while back in the UK, but Tor Nightfire apparently really likes Katrina Ward because this is the 3rd book they published by her since coming out. I've had mixed feelings about the ones in the past, and so you'll have to stay tuned how I felt about this one. Also from Flame Tree Press Publishing, I have a copy of Fellstones by Ramsey Campbell, and I'll be honest, I don't think I've ever actually read a book by him. I've always gotten the impression that he's more of a classic or traditional horror author in terms of his style and stories, and so I never really felt that they would be to my taste because I tend to look for something, I guess, a little bit different, but I did get an unsolicited copy of this one, so I'm definitely going to check it out. I believe it is coming out this fall and might already be out, so if that is something you're interested in, I would love to know down below, especially if you've read this author before, what you think of him. And I was very excited for horror when I received a copy of Necroscope by Brian Lumsley, and this is a re-release done by Tor Nightfire of the classic vampire story that I was wanting to read this fall. I was very excited that they sent the new edition. It is beautiful and dark, and another one that my husband said was gorgeous when he saw it. Again, he loves seeing my book mail. He's not much of a reader, but he really appreciates good cover art, and this one is gorgeous, and I'm just really hoping I'll fall in love with this book. It's a little bit hard to get copies of. It seems to be, again, a bit older, doesn't always have copies easily available through my library, so I was very excited to do this, and of course be coming back very soon, hopefully, with a review. Now, switching over to science fiction, I want to talk about Interface by Scott Britz Cunningham, and this is a book that I received for review unsolicited by Turner House Publishing. I've reviewed for them before and really liked some of their other books, so I'm hopeful that this one will work for me as well. I looked at the synopsis, and basically it's set in a near future where there are government mandated brain implants, and of course with any kind of setup like that, things go terribly wrong. So I believe it's science fiction, but also a dark dystopian style thriller. I'm hoping that it's going to be handled well. It's kind of a cliche plot, but again, if it's done well, if it's nuanced and thoughtful, it could be really interesting. The cover itself is quite stunning. I do love this image of the brain, and again, Turner House Publishing has been really good to me in the past with just selecting titles that they think I'll really enjoy, so I'm hopeful this one will be smart and entertaining and just up my alley. We shall see. And then from Titan Books, I received a copy of Fractured Infinity, and this is a book that follows a man who's trying to finish his documentary when he is approached by this physicist, and he says that he needs this man's help with this great project. They go to a top secret facility, and it turns out that there is an alternate self of him that has come from a parallel dimension. I love multiverses and parallel dimensions, all of that. So the setup definitely sounds intriguing. I am always looking for new sci-fi thrillers, and this one definitely, in my opinion, is underhyped. I really hadn't heard about it until Titan Books reached out, and so I said yes, 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 and I will be reviewing it soon. I believe it comes out the beginning of November. Then from Angry Robot Books, I received a copy of Hell Sands, and this is a book that is set in a dystopian future where there is a government that has created this drug called Bliss that just makes everyone happy, but of course some people do not react well to the drug, and because of that they are seen as lower in society. That's the basic premise of the book. I actually have read it by this point, but my review won't be coming out until next Thursday, so I'm going to be really vague and leave my thoughts there, and you'll have to wait till next week and hopefully subscribe if you haven't to see my further thoughts on this one. And one that I've already reviewed from Angry Robot Books is Full Immersion by Gemma Amor. This is actually a book I included in my horror wrap-up because it's horror or science fiction. So this is a book following a woman who is having dark thoughts. She's dealing with depression and suicidal thoughts. And so she goes on to take this virtual reality therapy. And of course, as you would expect in any kind of sci-fi horror with the setup, things start to go terribly wrong. They start to kind of blur the edges between what's real and what's imagined. And I really enjoyed it. Particularly, I love the depiction of the depression and just the mental health struggles. I thought it was very authentic, and probably because of the fact that the author was very open about how this book was really brought about from her own experiences after having a child and her own postpartum depression. And it definitely shines on the page. It's a very emotional book, feels very authentic, and if you can't tell, I loved it a lot. And continuing on with science fiction, but starting the orbit section of this video, I'm going to go through a couple of orbit titles I received recently. That first one is August Quito and the Mechas from Space by Alex White. This is the first book in a new science fiction series that follows a musician who gets pulled into this galactic war. I personally was looking for more mecha action. Instead, this one is much more fun and flamboyant and queer, and it's definitely much more lighthearted than my personal taste, but I do understand why so many people love it so much. More to my taste was this one, which I feel like is a sleeper hit, and that is Ymir by Rich Larson, which is a very loose retelling of Beowulf. And even if you haven't read Beowulf, which I have not, this book is wonderful. The characters, the world, everything is so richly developed. The world is just dark and weird, and I was just completely pulled into the story. I think that it has a fantastic tone. It's so different than the other science fiction books I've read, and I believe it's to be treated as a standalone, but that kind of makes me sad because I desperately want more. This is so good, and more people need to read this one. And then we have Eversion by Alistair Reynolds, which is a standalone, which is a big deal for him because a lot of his other books are tied up with his Revelation Space trilogy. But this is a great jumping off point for those of you that want to check him out. Basically, it's a sci-fi thriller that follows a doctor on a spaceship. They go to investigate this alien artifact and things go terribly wrong. I wish it had been more large in scope because what I love about Alistair Reynolds is his world building, but is it accessible? Is it easy to fly through? It's short, it's fast, absolutely. So it's definitely an interesting place to start if you want to try out his work. And now switching over to fantasy, but continuing on with more orbit titles, I first want to talk about this trilogy, which is The Goddess War, the first one being The Ranger of Marzana, the second one being The Queen of Emzera, I should not pronounce this on camera, and the last one being The Wizard of Eventide, all of them by John Scovard, also known as Kelly Scovard, I believe. And these are books that follow two siblings that are pulled apart by events and end up on different kind of sides of a war. I like the idea of this book more than the actual execution. The trilogy, in my opinion, was a little bit weak in terms of the character development, the plot, the motivations. I didn't completely buy it, but gosh, the covers are really, really pretty. Now, if you like the idea of the last book but are looking for some stronger storytelling, I would personally recommend Ashes of the Sun by Django Wexler and the follow-up book, Blood of the Chosen. And this is, again, a very similar premise. Basically, we follow two siblings where at the beginning of the story, there is an incident, it pulls them apart, they end up on different sides, and within the story, they go through training and go and kind of fulfill their destinies. This book feels heavily inspired by Star Wars. There are literal lightsaber battles in the book, but they just don't call them lightsabers. And I really enjoyed it. Is it the most, unique, fresh story that I've never seen before? No, but was it really entertaining and really enjoyable storytelling? Absolutely. I love this one, and the sequel as well was really solid. And then we have the first two books in the Rook and Ruins series, the first one being The Obsidian Tower and the second one being The Quicksilver Court. And this is a really enjoyable story, again, that follows a few different points of view, but primarily we follow a young woman who has magical abilities that when she touches someone, it's very dangerous and deadly, and so she's very much separated by society. And of course, what appears to be a curse possibly actually has some potential, and so she kind of learns to hone her skills. I end up really liking this one. I don't hear a lot of people talk about it online. I thought the first book was very well done, and the second book was just as strong. So I'm very excited to see the final book, which I think is coming out either the end of this year or early next year. So I'm very thankful that I got a chance to catch up before the final one comes out. And I got the opportunity to read the first two books in the Covenant of Steel trilogy, the first one being The Pariah and the second one being The Martyr, both by Anthony Ryan. And these are very classic fancy revenge stories. So if you're someone who loves revenge stories, I think you'll enjoy this one and its sequel. And I believe the last one is supposed to come out sometime in 2023. I like them, but I definitely want fantasy that I think is a bit more out of the box than usual, but I have friends that absolutely love this series because, again, if you love revenge fantasy and can't get enough of it, I do think that it's very well done. I thought that the writing and characters were all very well developed. It's just not completely to my taste because I love fantasy that is a little bit more fresh and unique and kind of surprises me with stories that don't necessarily lean so heavily into tropes. And I also got to read The Oleander Sword by Tasha Suri. This is the second book in the series that starts with the Jasmine Throne. I read that last year and was very excited to continue on. This is an Indian-inspired fantasy series that follows a few different points of view, and I liked the first book, but I really like the second one a lot more. I think the fact that the characters have just really grown and where they are in terms of position and power in this book was a lot more satisfying, so I thought that the plot moved along very well. Often in second books you kind of have that struggle where like nothing happens, but that was not the case here. In fact, I actually thought that the plot was much stronger in this one, so definitely recommend if you were on the fence after the Jasmine Throne. I do think it's worth continuing on. And I also got the chance to read and review Ruination by Anthony Reynolds, and this is the first tie-in for League of Legends. So if you enjoy the video game or love the TV show Arcane, this is one you may want to check out. I have not played the video game, but I have watched the TV show, and I will say that I like this one, but I didn't find it particularly special, or I think if I compare it to standalone fantasy stories I've read that aren't tie-ins with other media, I felt that this one wasn't as good. But again, if you are completely in love with the world of League of Legends, this one might appeal to you more and you might have more of a connection to it, again, based off of your affection for the video game company. And last, I want to mention a book that is not an Orbit title, and that is Silver Queendom by Dan Cabolt. And this is a book that I received for review from Angry Robot Books. I've already reviewed it. Essentially, it's a heist story where we follow a group of individuals that are running a bar, but it's really just a cover for their actual job of doing these heists, and so the story goes from there. I said in my review that if you enjoy heist stories, this is one you may want to check out. I don't think it's my favorite heist story, but it still was really enjoyable and kind of hit on the tropes that I tend to really enjoy within that subgenre. So that's it for this video here. I'd love to hear of the books I talked about. Which ones are you planning on checking out for yourself? And I would love to hear also what is a book that you recently bought or received as a gift. Once again, I want to thank Chris and Alen for these very generous belated birthday gifts. They were very well received and I can't wait to dive into them with reads and rereads in some cases. If you're new to my channel, please consider subscribing. I do read a lot of adult fantasy, horror, thrillers, and science fiction and true crime. And if you want to help me out with the video, you can give it a thumbs up. You can drop a comment, even if just an emoji like a stack of books. And if you want to help me out more, you can hit that little notification bell. That way you'll never miss a video from me. Thanks so much for watching. I'll talk to you again soon. Okay, bye-bye.